What is up, people? What is up, people? This is Abraham Walker with Ask A Walker. You know, the Virginia real estate agent. Now, I will let you know that this little sesh that we're about to do right now, this is a personal session. The views of Abraham Walker are not the same as Ask A Walker. Um, but let's talk about something that has been a little interesting conversation on our Facebook over the last couple hours, and it's about these sexless marriages. Um, there was a gentleman, or there was a comedian I follow who posted something about a husband who is trying to bring to his wife's attention that they are participating in a sexless marriage, and his method of bringing that to his wife's attention was through a spreadsheet, right? Spreadsheet that showed how often they had intercourse over a 2-month period, and he feels that that percentage of sex to non-sex days was not inappropriate. That's not the right word. It didn't meet his expectations, right? So we have this gentleman who has expectations, and they have a his spouse who is the person who fulfills this individual's request. And that was what the conversation was around. I want to jump on because I noticed that some parts of the conversation are a little bit weird to me, in a sense that some people believe that this man acted in a his tactic was not effective, or it was irrational, or it was childish. And and that's why I wanted to kind of to come on and kind of talk about this just a little bit. First off, if a guy if a guy is willing to document how often he is dissatisfied with a situation, then this guy is making plans to do something. What he's going to plan to do, I don't know. I just know one thing: if you get to a certain level of frustration where you would like to document all of the times that something occurs or doesn't occur, then this person is preparing for something. I don't think that we should take that lightly, that this person's frustration has led this person to seeking out creating a strategy for how they will manage this problem. And you also want to consider that this person views their spouse as a problem. They view their spouse's behavior or performance as a problem. So how would this person solve it? I don't know. I don't know, because I haven't done something like this. But I will say I do agree with the idea, though. I do agree with the idea that you should, in the event that you're dissatisfied and you believe that things aren't going your way, that you should document it, right? Because you want to, oftentimes, especially in these relationships and marriages, you believe things are going one way, and your spouse lets you know that things are not going the way you believe, right? So that you have an audience of one, which is kind of weird. It's unique. So you have this person who provides you with this service, and you kind of have to keep them engaged, which is not a common relationships. Like if you work for a company, the company, if you don't perform, they could fire you. Your spouse would have to divorce you, right? And then if you're okay with being divorced, then it sounds like you would try to work towards some type of resolution. I do know a couple guys who are in quote unquote sexless marriages, or at least marriages where they're not having as much sex as they would like. So then it gets into the conversation, or the part of the discussion, where what is an appropriate amount of sex to have with your spouse? I don't know. That's a personal issue. That's a personal issue. Um, I think it's one of those things where you have to. open up the dialogue on what is an acceptable amount. And then also the conversation has to come around to what is unacceptable. What I find is in some of the conversations we're having on Facebook, it seems like a lot of the women are saying that the actions of the wife is okay and that the guy just has to deal with it. How will he deal with it though? Will he deal with it in an effective manner? If you don't if you don't have an open line of communication with each other, are you going to be okay with this person believing that they're not being treated fairly to try to even the odds? What would that look like? So I think that these are all important issues. Like I said, I know a couple people in these types of situations and they don't I think that they have reasonable requests. Now I will say, since I run a dad's group, I'm really just talking to a lot of guys. I don't really talk to women like this. Um, so I don't talk to women at all, to be honest with you, about their relationships outside of my wife. And it, from what I understand about most women don't talk to men about their relationships. So they're usually keeping the conversation to women only. Men are talking to men only. So I think that's also a part of the problem as well, is that we don't really have any kind of cross sharing of information, which then you build these two camps. You have the camp of women thinking that they know men, and then you have men thinking that they know women, and then you just have people kind of talking over one another or talking in passing, right? Which then doesn't really come to a conclusion. So then you got to ask yourself, what is the purpose of conversation? What is the purpose of communication? Is it to come to a resolution? Is it to move forward? Or is it just to know what suffering you have in store for you, right? So that's important. There's this marriage counselor who talks about how most of your arguments in your marriage are going to be arguments that you will never really solve. They'll just always be with you. It's kind of sad, but it is also kind of freeing knowing that a lot of what you experience is really just a part of being married versus thinking that you'll be able to fix something or correct your circumstance. So that's important too. That's important to come to terms with, we are there's a certain level of flexibility in our there's a certain level of flexibility in our you know in in our ability to adjust or to make adjustments. So just accepting that, let's say for instance, if your wife is caring, right? But if caring was on a scale and she was a 5, then it's likely that she could maybe become a 7 over time. But to think that your wife would go from a 5 to a 10 may not be reasonable. So there is this flexibility to keep in mind how much someone will stretch. But yeah, I do find some of the responses from the women on this topic to be um interesting. It's just an interesting response, because here you have a guy who made a spreadsheet, shared it with his wife, and it seems to me like it's just a logical way to try to solve an emotional problem. And if frequency of sex is the guy's goal, then it seems like the first thing he would bring up is how infrequent the events are happening, so that there isn't this conversation of, well, I don't think that you know how many times we're doing it. It's not happening that long, or we are doing it more often. So now he just moves it onto paper or moves it onto a digital format to track it. That just seems logical. I don't see how somebody would object to that idea. Um, but yeah, that's interesting. Another problem I have with this conversation is that the guys that I know who are in either sexless or sex deprived marriages, so not necessarily they don't have sex, they just don't have sex at the frequency that they would like. These guys, when they talk about it, they sound like they are frustrated with their current circumstance, and they've brought this up to their wives, and their wives are not really receptive, or they make light of the situation and make it seem like it's not something that's a serious issue. I just think that that's a horrible strategy, given the fact that now you've placed the responsibility on the other person to solve a two-person problem, right? If your wife isn't having sex with you, then it's not like you can force her to have sex with you, right? And vice versa. Again, though, I'm really talking from the man's perspective because I don't talk to women about this issue. So, what is what is your best um what is in the best what do I want to say? What's in the best interest of the relationship? Is it two people putting their heads together to solve this problem, or for you to say it's a problem for one person to solve? Another thing too that I disagree with some of the women who have an opinion about this is they make it seem like the guy needs to do more dishes or do more chores around the house so that the wife could be more open to having sex. Is that's a that's an interesting formula there, because it assumes that the husband isn't doing enough chores. How many chores would the guy have to do? Again, this is something you could just communicate with the other person, right? Like, how many dishes would the guy have to do to have intercourse that night? You know what I mean? Like, does he have to put away all the dishes? Does he need to wash all this? Does he need to cook and clean? Does he need to cook just dinner? Does he need to cook just lunch? Like, what needs to be cooked? What domestic duties need to be done for you to feel sexually aroused by your spouse? And then spell that stuff out. But the problem with becoming so rigid with your request is that in the event the guy does fulfill those needs, then what happens if you say, I don't feel like it that day? I mean, that's a tough position to be in. All right, so there's another position that was shared on this particular Facebook post about how so one thing I noticed when I'm talking to my guys, again, I run a dad's group, so I talk to a lot of guys. A lot of guys, when I talk to them about bringing confrontation to their wives, they will express um they'll express some concern about the idea of confronting their wives, because they'll either share how confrontation in the past hasn't gone well. And the common theme between most guys is that their wives, when they bring some type of issue to their wives that's a highly sensitive issue, their wives will start crying, and then the crying will lead to the guys having to tend to the feelings of their wife, and now they can't actually address the issue that the husband wanted to bring to the table, and then the issue just goes away. Like, it doesn't go away, it's just swept under the rug, because now you have to console this person who's emotional, time gets away from them, and then boom, the issue is not handled. So there's this concern that some guys have about even bringing topics to their wives, because their wives are manipulative. And I do believe it is a form of manipulation, because um I do believe it's a form of manipulation because it's such an effective strategy, right? If you don't have an uncomfortable conversation and you know that crying will get you out of the conversation, then why don't you just cry? My grandmother, my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, she used to use corporal punishment to manage children, so all of the grandchildren. Now, one thing I noticed with my paternal grandmother is that she did not like when you started crying, or she would really use those tactics until you started crying. So what I did was, every time she would try to raise her hand, I would just start crying. I would, and then she was like, "Well, I guess my work is done." And then, sure enough, as soon as you turn around, I just stop crying, and I'll just move on. So again, I think it's important for the wife to understand how men perceive the situation. And if you don't have an environment where your husband isn't comfortable bringing stuff to your table, I mean, you have a problem. It's not his problem too. That's another thing too. I find funny about or interesting about these discussions that we have about sexes, right, or genders, is that each party, each side believes that it's a one person problem, right? Like the comedian that brought this issue to the table said that if your wife isn't have sex with you on a regular basis, having intercourse at a frequency that you uh desire, then you should just masturbate, which is a weird request. I think that that's just a weird, that's a weird no solution, right? What is that solution? That solution is just to how long do you suffer in silence? Right? Like we got to say, like, okay, great. Okay, great. If the wife isn't going to perform after a certain period of time, when do you bring it to that person's attention? When do you start to make demands? When do you start to become so frustrated that you leave the relationship? All right. So something to consider. There's another point that I want to bring out here is that one of the ladies said that if a man is too scared of crying women, that that's a weak excuse. It's a weak excuse. I think that this is a interesting position to take, because if you assume that men are stronger than women on average, then women would have some tactic or technique to control or influence men. One of those ways is through emotions. I don't think that this is an unreasonable request. I mean, women wear makeup, they wear push-up bras, they wear tight-fitting clothing, all in the goal of manipulating men. So some women will say, "Well, this isn't for men. It's something I like to do myself. I do it for. I like to look nice, but for who?" We could say that it stems around men. Even when my wife likes to wear, she used to wear like high heels, and I would say, "Why are you wearing high heels? They look uncomfortable." And she said, "Well, it make you look nice." And I was like, "Make you look nice to who?" And she's like, "Like men like it." It's like, I don't. I mean, I don't get it, but that's what women do. It's not me. I mean, it's not. It's just a thing, right? But anyway, um, again, this conversation I'm having with you is really just about, like, what is this? What's the strategy here? When my guys tell me that their wives are withholding sex, I ask them, "Are you frustrated?" And then they'll say, "Yes, I am frustrated about this issue." And I was like, I would ask them again. I was like, so your wife is frustrating you. Is that a good strategy? And then they'll say, "Oh, I mean, I don't think so." I was like, "I don't think so either. I mean, why would you want to be in a relationship with somebody and them be frustrated?" I mean, this is your if you think about relationships like a store, right? So sex is a item on the shelf. Um, you're the in a monogamous relationship that a lot of American husband husband and wives have. There isn't another place to get that item off the shelf. So the only store that has it is in your significant other. And now I know some people in the comment section of this particular thread, some people are bringing up, like people who have cancer and all kind of other stuff. I'm talking about the normal people. Okay, normal people. I'm not talking about these abnormal people. Everybody doesn't have cancer. Everybody doesn't have erectile dysfunction. Everybody doesn't have all these other things. I'm talking about just the normals, the norms. Okay, the normies. um if you're in a monogamous relationship, then it seems like this is a horrible strategy. This is a horrible strategy. You're leaving the guy to solve his own problem, and then if the guy steps out on the wife, then he's like a piece of garbage, right? People will say that, "Oh my God, men aren't faithful, this, and men aren't this." But what about women? What is the woman's responsibility to her man, to her husband in this scenario? So let's go through some of the other comments. Yada yada yada. Okay, so one of my positions on this is, if your wife doesn't want to have sex with you, then your wife should be able to give you either a hall pass, which allows you to have sex with whoever you want, or your wife should agree, right, to allow you to use an escort service, right? Now, I make that suggestion because, again, take the store analogy. You have the product that this guy wants. You're saying that you're not going to give it to him. If you're not going to give it to him, then you should at least let the guy get it somewhere else. That's the reasonable thing. So yes, hold your merchandise for yourself, right? Hold your item on the shelf for yourself, and then give the guy an opportunity, renegotiate. I'm a huge advocate of renegotiating your marriage terms, right? Because obviously, when you get married at the beginning, you're just like all in love and all this other stuff. It's so great. But then after 10 years or so, you're like, we need to probably readjust this contract. So let the guy renegotiate. I'm a fan of that. Okay, so there's a guy that commented in this thread that talked about how all of the men who commented on this post, all of them agree with the guy. They're like, well, yeah, I mean, I know guys. I mean, a lot of guys were like, either I know people or no one said they have personal experience with this, but they know people who are going through this sexless marriage or sex deprived marriages, and it's frustrating. So yes, the guy, it makes sense for the guy to calculate how many times or at least count how many times this has happened. But the women are like, no, this is the man's fault. He must have done something to her to make her not want to have sex with him. He must have harmed her or wronged her for her not to have sex with her. I mean, they got to have a conversation about it, because if the guy values sex and you're not giving it to him, then you should expect him to cheat on you. You should expect him to step out on you. You should expect him to do whatever he wants to do or needs to do to fulfill his needs. And you shouldn't judge him for that. Since no one can judge you for withholding sex, then no one should be able to judge him for going out to fulfill his sexual desires outside of his marriage, given the fact that you don't want to fulfill his orders. Right. All right. So there was another conversation about this, another thread in this discussion about how, what if this young lady and this young man, they got married young, and then maybe the guy got out of shape, or for whatever reasons, the wife is no longer attracted to him. What if in that scenario, what is the young lady to do? She doesn't want to have sex with him. Easy. This is a easy. I'm glad that this option was brought up to us. Easy. You should let the guy renegotiate his terms. You don't have to exit the marriage just because you decide to have sex with somebody outside of the marriage. But you should be able to come to terms with the fact that if you don't want to service him, then let him go and service himself somewhere else, and then still come home, right? But that's too logical. It just makes too much sense. So you would like to withhold sex from this person, say that you're not interested in having sex with them anymore, and then what are they supposed to do? Nothing. Are they what are they supposed to do? I don't understand that part. That part is the part that kind of is, I'm curious about, because you don't really have too many options. You know what I mean? It seems like all your options are bad options. All right. And then there was one other conversation, or one other comment in this discussion about how all men are trash, which is, I don't know who wronged this person, but all men can't be trash. I mean, you haven't gone through all the men. Some guys are good. You just got yourself a bad batch. A lot. Also, just read this other comment about how if you're in a sexless marriage, then it's probably physical reasons, emotional reasons, or somebody's having an affair. That could be the case. If you're having an affair, let the other person have an affair too. Let them get their stuff off too. Y'all may be able to come to terms with the fact that you have an open relationship and you still stay married. Especially if you have kids, you don't want to separate that household. That's not good. Divorce doesn't do a good job for divorce doesn't do a good job of for the kids, right? It's not a good number on the kids. But yeah, so that's about it. That's about it. I just wanted to kind of come on here, have a little quick discussion about this. I think it's an interesting conversation. I think everybody's marriage goes through ebbs and flows, so it's natural to kind of get off course, right? Sometimes you have high sex drive, low sex drive. Sometimes you're stressed out at work. Sometimes you're transitioning. You have kids coming into the conversation. You are switching jobs, switching careers, switching locations. There's ways to get off course, right? But if your spouse brings it to your attention that, hey, look, I think that we're not having sex enough, don't don't blow the person off. Don't do that. That's not a good strategy. You're leaving them to come up with a solution to the problem themselves. And sex is a two-person act, so two people should come together to find out a solution. I'm pro marriage, so I believe that everyone should be married, and I believe that being married is like the best way to go through life, right? So I'm biased to that degree. I don't like to see my guys stressed out or frustrated, because frustration left unchecked, stress left unchecked, it pushes you to the extremes of some of these solutions. And we got to be honest, a lot of people are not ready for extreme solutions. They're not. So let's mitigate that. Let's make these problems manageable, or let's get to these problems before they become extreme. Let's nip them in the bud. I hope that's what people get from these conversations. I don't think the guy is right. I don't think the young lady is right. I think that they both need to come to some type of agreement, right? Maybe sex once a year isn't enough, right? But maybe twice a week, right? Maybe 3 times a week, or whatever it is. Um, some conversation has to come up. Oh, you know what? Before we end tonight's session, somebody mentioned you don't want to be having sex with somebody who doesn't want to have sex, and you want the person was saying that a husband wants his wife to want to have sex with him. That was laughable. That was a laughable. That was, of course, coming from a woman. Men are not wired that way. Sure, would you want it to have sex make the sex better? Yes. Whether or not it's more or less enjoyable is a different conversation from whether or not having sex would satisfy the desires of the guy, right? And right now we're just talking about satisfying the desires. We're not talking about the quality of the performance. You can work on becoming more into sex over time. So I think that was a interesting little perspective that was shared. But yes, most men are not really worried about the quality at the beginning of the stages. If they are not having much sex, the goal is to increase the amount of sex they're having, and then they can work on quality over time. So that is it. That is it for me. I hope that this conversation helps someone else out. I don't think that sexist marriages are a laughing matter. I don't think that guys or any spouse being frustrated any length of time is a good thing. I don't think that that's a good thing. I think you gotta nip this stuff in the bud. You have to address any problems in your relationship at the very beginning, and then move forward to growing old and dying together. Right? Watch your grandchildren get get older, and then sail into the sunset. So that's it for me. Let me know what you think about this conversation. I think it's super interesting. I am pleased with my continued desire to have engaging conversations, and also just to engage everybody in a respectful manner. Mm-mm-mm. So yeah, sexless marriages. What do you think about them? How would you solve the problem? That's another thing too. I like to ask the ladies, since they believe that it's the man's fault. How should we solve the problem? One person recommended washing more dishes, which I thought was funny. I think it's funny because how many dishes should he wash? Is it once a day? He should wash dishes, all the dishes. What is it? What domestic duties would you like that person to do? All right. Well, I'll leave it at this. We're already 30 minutes in. I didn't expect to talk this long, but it's an interesting conversation. If you have any questions, post them down below. I will be sure to respond back to it. I hope that you are having a wonderful start to your 2023. And I hope that you are engaged in some level of community wherever you are. Find yourself a couple people, 2 or 3 people. If you get 2 or 3 friends, 2 or 3 acquaintances near you, you can have a great quality of life, a great life. Just find some people to walk through life with. That's it for me. Take care. I will see you on the next video. Peace.